In an era where connected devices quietly run everything from hospital beds to traffic lights, a single breach can now cause more than just data loss. It can actually endanger lives. So today I want to explore why IoT security is no longer just a box-ticking exercise, but a mission-critical priority. And also discuss the surge in IoT malware, the blind spots that are still haunting entire industries, and how AI-powered tools are giving defenders a fighting chance against all those threats that we're being bombarded with. Who am I going to speak with about this? Who can give me the answers that I need? Well, with that stage set, I'm going to officially introduce you to today's guest. So thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Syed Zaeem Hosain. I use my middle name, and people call me Z, the first letter of my middle name here in the U.S., Z, if I'm in the U.K. or elsewhere. I am currently the Chief Evangelist for a company called Aeris Communications. We're based out of the U.S., headquarters in San Jose, California. However, we have presence in just about, any country you can think of in terms of our services now. I am one of the founders. I've been here almost 30 years, and I ran engineering and operations for many, many years till decided that being woken up at 3:00 in the morning for dealing with an operations issue was not fun. So I hired my replacements, and that's worked out very well. The gentleman who is now our current CTO, I used to be the CTO, the current CTO is much more knowledgeable about certain aspects of development and operations than I was. So it's kind of cool. The company is in the space of what's called the Internet of Things, IoT. And that, I think, is a wonderful term. I did not coin that, and fortunately, I'd love to take the credit for it, but I didn't. I think it has captured the imagination of people, where we had the Internet that people have become very familiar with over the last few decades, Internet of Things, which is where machines and systems and solutions for data talk to each other, has become quite prominent. It's growing rapidly, and it's impacting areas where you wouldn't even anticipate that an IoT solution is at play. I can recognize a smartphone anywhere in the world. It looks pretty similar to just about everything, or a cellular phone, but you'd be amazed at what kind of products have IoT solutions built into them, ranging from small little things like a temperature sensor on the wall, all the way up to what I consider an IoT device is a connected car. So it's pretty impressive that it has impacted our world and as we live in, and doing good, creating efficiencies and helping people around the world. We have applications. If you don't mind my waxing a little bit on this one, we have applications, for example, in Africa, monitoring solar panels. We have applications in India and elsewhere, providing data on usage and rental of tractors being used in generating food. Here in the U.S., a big aspect of irrigation systems is the centralized pivot systems that are used for putting water out into these giant food generation fields, if you will, and having them monitored, where previously the problems were that you had to send somebody to deal with any issues, even if you knew there was one, and nowadays it can be reported on, and the water systems can be modified on the fly. So I could go on and on about that, but I really think that it's an exciting field. It's the kind of stuff that you wouldn't expect could be in the background of everything we live and do today. I was a little taken aback when about a year ago, I decided to just sort of count the number of connected devices I had in my home. And just my home alone, I have 24 things that are sending data in some way, shape, or form.
Wow, it's absolutely incredible. And as I was listening to you there, I was ticking off all the reasons in my head why I invited you on the podcast today, because every day I try and talk about a technology or something or an area that people don't automatically associate with technology, and then also demystify a trending topic. And IoT has been a huge trend now for a number of years. And just to set the scene for everyone listening, we've heard about IoT, but how would you describe the state of adoption today? Are we reaching a point where its growth is almost outpacing our ability to secure it, or where are we at now?
That's a very good question. In fact, if you look at the numbers, it's quite amazing. There was an estimate the analysts have presented at the end of 2024. There were more than 14 billion, that's billion in American billion, of course, devices out there. That is more than the number of people on the planet. And if you think about that, it's becoming pervasive in ways that you wouldn't anticipate. And the numbers are going to continue to grow. The next set of data I just saw recently, a few days ago, as a matter of fact, is that by 2034, we anticipate there will be more than 35 billion devices that are transmitting data in some way, shape, or form in the IoT space. So the adoption has been enormous in places where you wouldn't anticipate that data would be of value or control systems would be of value. And I think that's exactly the point I would make about any technology. Once you forget that the technology exists and it's part of our daily life, that's when you know it has arrived. I consider IoT it's sort of the next wave revolution, if you will, that we are now experiencing and just in our day-to-day lives, frankly.
Yeah, it's something we're seeing more and more of. These devices are almost invisible to us. Even if we were to go out and buy a brand new TV, when you buy that TV, you don't think, hey, how long is this TV going to be security patched for? Or, is the TV going to be abandoned by the maker after 3-4 years? And it becomes the weakest entry to the network. And one of the reasons I say that is a recent report from Deloitte highlighted that there is a 400% surge in IoT malware attacks. And Forrester elsewhere, they predicted we will see a major breach this year. So what is it that makes IoT such an attractive target for attackers compared to maybe traditional IT systems? Is it because they're not patched as often? There's a lot of cheap devices from overseas. What is it?
A combination of things, and I didn't address that in the previous question because I knew that you might ask for more detail in the next one. It's a combination of things, primarily having to do with the fact that we didn't consider these kinds of IoT devices as being vulnerable because the thought was always, oh, they're small little units, they're kind of dumb, they're not smart devices, but that is changing. You now have a situation where people are putting product out there in areas where you're not worrying about security because you don't think about it. And the attackers, who were going after, human beings with malware, via email, and corporations with phishing attacks, etc., have shifted over to the IoT space because it is indeed enormous. One of the classic problems with an IoT device is that if you have a vulnerability in there, it's likely to be pervasive to that particular application, meaning every device that is associated with that application, and it could be in the hundreds of thousands or millions of units, every device is going to have that same vulnerability, and therefore once it is discovered, the attacker can easily take advantage of that fact and take over all of the rest of those devices. And it's been going on for a number of years. It's just been increasing in intensity. You may have heard about this back in October of 2016, which is almost 9 years ago at this point. There was an attack against home security video cameras and residential and business security cameras, which were taken over by an attacker. And what they discovered was a vulnerability that was very unfortunate because the designers had not thought through the implications of what would happen. And the product was taken over and used as a general purpose attack on enterprises on the internet. 21 different companies ranging from Amazon to Netflix. This is all public information that you can find out. To Yahoo got attacked in a denial of service attack, which you now had essentially anywhere between, I forget the exact numbers, but somewhere between 500,000 and 750,000 devices simultaneously overloading the capacity of these sites to avoid the denial of service attack. That's the kind of stuff that is very easy to do in the IoT space, unfortunately. And so if you haven't thought about security, haven't thought about the classic concepts of security by design up front, you're going to get taken advantage of. People are busy making product, right? The developers and designers are focused on the features, the capabilities, the data you want to send, the control that you want to have on the device that's out there in the field. And they don't think about the fact that these attackers are in many ways just as capable as them. And with the new AI-based tools that are becoming available, artificial intelligence-based tools that are becoming available, it's too easy to attack large numbers of devices that respond in exactly the same way. If you attack a human being, you're going to have an intelligent person in general who's aware of what might be happening. If you attack a corporation, you'll have an IT team or security team dealing with that attack. When you have devices that are all over the world, we operate in over 190 different countries. When those devices are all over the world and you find a vulnerability, an attacker finds a vulnerability and takes advantage of it, that can have some serious implications, and we have to watch out for that. I think the Forrester prediction of a major breach in 2025 is probably going to be of concern. My issue is that if the application is something that has a critical aspect to it, such as a medical device, which might impact a human being, that's when I start getting a little bit concerned that people who are making these kind of products really need to think through security up front.
And I recently spoke with the Red Cross, so they're remaking its icon, that Red Cross emblem, making it more suitable for a digital age to ensure that things like our critical infrastructure remains off limit during periods of conflict, as it should do and has traditionally done in battlefields. And of course, in industries like healthcare, transportation and energy, these attacks are not just threatening data, but can cause real-world disruption and even physical harm. So how worried do you think businesses and regulators should be right now?
There should be. And that's one of the reasons why you're starting to see a tremendous effort on the part of regulators in particular to make sure that we can do the best we can to secure these devices. And an important aspect of securing these devices is that you can do the best practices that are available to a given product company at the time that they deploy these units. But something else to keep in mind is that IoT devices, because they're generally associated with some kind of functionality that a human being is not overseeing, they're out there for years. So we have devices that have been operating in the field for 5, 10, 15 years, and it's not surprising that a new vulnerability may come along. So you have to monitor, you have to understand what could happen to these devices when they're taking over, and deal with the fact that you need to take them off the air, and in critical infrastructure scenarios, make sure that they are not impacting human life in some way, shape, or form. So if you look what's happening in the EU in particular, there are these new regulations coming along called the Cyber Resilience Act, or CRA, and the associated similar regulations in the medical and the aviation area, where you have to make sure that you protect your devices and the network and the application in the cloud as best as you can. There's an initiative that an organization called the IoT M2M Council, which is actually based out of the UK. We have a number of members. I used to be a chair on that organization. We have an annual rotating chairman who's elected to the office. And one of the things that I was concerned about was IoT security needs to have the certification requirements put in place, which from an end-to-end perspective, meaning the device out in the field, the network over which it transmits, which is where my company, Aeris, has provided solutions, as well as in the cloud, are taken into account. So there's a team that has got about 50 different companies, ranging from large mobile network operators that you would be very familiar with over in Europe and the US, as well as large security companies and providers of radios, who are trying to make sure that IoT security meets the regulations, which is a very important driver, and then also provides the necessary solutions in a protected way, so that the company who's deploying those devices can essentially make sure that the data is protected, that the devices are protected. Because you can have simple fraud, which, the device might be stolen and used in ways that you don't want. The SIM could be taken out and put into a different smartphone, for example, and all the way up to where a control function of a medical device could be attacked, and that's not a good thing to have happen. People have to be protected. And actually, I want to make an interesting observation, which I think is something that I have not seen other people make, which is that, to me, the presence of a regulation, particularly in the area of security, is both a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it means it's going to protect people, but it's a bad thing. It's because we fail to take something into account in the markets, in the industry. And so we need to make sure that we have a consistent capability for securing our devices, securing our applications, and then certifying that we've done a good job. That's what we're really focused on at this time.
And when researching here, I read that you've often spoken about the danger of treating IoT security as almost somewhat of an afterthought. And I know it's a topic that you're very passionate about. So the
Yes.
question I have to ask is, why are so many organizations still neglecting to secure connected devices properly? And what is that mindset shift that needs to happen to make sure we're not talking about this in another few years?
That's a darn good question.
Yeah.
I have been concerned about IoT security for almost 2 decades at this point. And, it was something that people just didn't think would be a attack surface. And that's the word that's used in the security industry, meaning that people wouldn't worry about these simple devices that were out there. The problem is that these devices have become more complex over time. And as I sort of mentioned a little bit earlier, the focus is on making the product work well, provide the data, provide the control functions you need, provide the features that you need. And the developers are not focused on making sure that they are secure. And also, it's a new frontier, if you will. The whole concept of security attacks on systems and devices is something that's only been happening in the past 20 to 30 years, and it's now shifted into IoT. So the mindset shift that needs to occur is that people need to realize and recognize that we are entering an era where you could have an enormous number of devices out there that could be attacked, and they are not, generally speaking, operated by a human being like a smartphone might, and therefore the attack could be successful in ways that you haven't anticipated. You have to recognize that security by design, which is to do it up front, make sure your product is as secure as you can make it. The concept of security by default, meaning you enable it. You don't just put it in the device and forget that it's in there. As well as a new concept, a new term that I heard, which I absolutely love, is called security by demand, which is that enterprises have to recognize that their consumers, their product buyers are going to insist that the products have security, and the regulators will insist that the products have security. So it's a mindset that is changing. Will we be discussing this 5 or 10 years from now? Yes. Again, not because we haven't done our job, but because the attackers are looking and investigating for new ways to make sure that they can get in and create havoc.
And the good news is that you guys have developed AI-driven solutions like IoT Watchtower that fight back against some of the very problems that we're talking about today. But what excites me about this is how we've got two formally labeled emerging technologies, IoT and AI, but not what they're doing on their own, but how they're converging to create a solution here. So how exactly do you see AI helping to spot and neutralize threats that might have previously slipped through traditional security measures?
Exactly. That's a darn good question from the perspective of the amount of devices and the amount of data that is being sent. Frankly, in our company, we literally have billions of messages coming in every day from the devices that our customers have deployed around the world. And when you look at billions of messages, there is just no way a simple analysis or a human being could take advantage of some kind of analysis of that data to prevent any breach from actually succeeding beyond a certain guarded region. But the problem is discovery, right? You have to find that there has been a breach. You have to be aware that there's something is awry, and you need to make sure that you put a solution out there that fixes that problem. So what we did with our IoT Watchtower system is to say, in the cellular IoT space, when you're using the cellular networks around the world as a transport, you're going to have scenarios where the devices may be transmitting data in ways that you hadn't anticipated. They may be bypassing your enterprises. They may be bypassing the cloud where you're expecting the data to show up and going off into destinations which are not good, meaning that the data could be bad. And then those destinations could inject malware and create problems by having control and command difficulties essentially inside the device from a remote location. So we believe very strongly that it is good to do security by design up front, but then also you need to rely on the fact that monitoring tools such as what we do are available to make sure that the devices are protected in the future. Yes, could things slip through? It's going to happen. What's more important is to make sure you can mitigate those changes as quickly as you can do so. For example, if you need to update a capability out there, a feature called over-the-air update or OTA is essential. I used to believe that OTA capability in devices, if it's capable and smart enough to do so, was a nice to have. 10 years, 15 years ago, I'd said, okay, you can add new features, all that. But today, I believe it's a critical aspect of ensuring that if you have a security problem, you can fix it remotely, because the cost of repair otherwise could be horrendous when you have hundreds of thousands of devices that need to be updated.
100% with you. And elsewhere, of course, regulations or regulators are tightening with frameworks like NIS2, and we've seen the Cyber Resilience Act coming into play. But how are these new rules changing how companies approach IoT security planning and indeed investment? Is it too early to tell yet, or what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, before I answer that, Neil, I neglected to add in your part of your question on the previous one, which is AI, how that's playing a role. When you have a lot of data, automation and AI, machine learning, analysis of that data, and then taking automated action is extremely important. There's a new concept called agentic AI, which is to allow for automation in a system to be able to do exactly what a human being might do in certain data gathering and analysis situations, particularly if a breach has been detected. One important thing that I like to point out is that agentic AI is very useful in simple applications, but if you have a medical application, I'd want to make sure that that automation didn't create problems rather than solve them. Now, when you look at these regulations that are coming along, specifically NIS2 and the Cyber Resilience Act, or CRA, over in Europe, they are absolutely essential for protecting people. And I think that the companies that are on the forefront of understanding what these regulations are and how they need to respond to them are taking a little bit of both a careful, cautious approach as well as a recognition that they have to follow the rules. The careful, cautious approach is to understand that these rules have some significant financial penalties for failure to meet them. And that's a good thing, right? You have to get incentives to make sure that the companies are doing the job correctly. They're following the rules and regulations that these regulators have put forth in NIS2 and the CRA. But at the same time, some of the rules are still fuzzy, and that's one of the reasons why they've been given time, right? If the CRA has been announced, but it's not going to go into effect for another 3 or 4 years, that is a timeline. It tells the companies they need to conform, they need to make sure that they get their products to meet the requirements of the regulations. On the other hand, some of those regulations are going to be tough to do. So those requirements and those regulations are going to be tough to do. So there's a lot of investigation going on as to make it happen in the time frame that we need to make it happen. The automotive world, for example, has had these regulations for a long time, right? You have to have consistency in the way automobiles brake and have their lights on the back of the car in a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. It's been there for almost 70 years, but the cybersecurity regulations in connected cars only went into effect in the middle of last year. That's a change that car companies have had to respond to, and it's a good change.
And I'm now going to ask you to open the top drawer of your desk, pull out a crystal ball, and ask you to gaze into that virtual crystal ball and look ahead to 2026 and beyond. It's only 6 months away. I'm curious, what role do you see yourselves playing in shaping that next wave of secure IoT? And also, what should businesses be doing today to avoid becoming tomorrow's cautionary tales that end up in our news feeds? Any advice there?
Yeah, absolutely. We believe that securing your IoT solutions is vital. It is something that we have been offering solutions for. We announced it formally earlier this year, and companies who have taken advantage of the tool itself, the system itself, have discovered how amazingly unknowing how amazingly, maybe the right word is not unknowing, but their devices were transmitting data that they were absolutely unaware of. And they hadn't seen it. They hadn't realized that things were going awry, and they recognized that monitoring is an important part of going forward. In the future, we believe that the agentic AI and other AI-based automation tools are going to be kind of key, because the amount of data, the amount of devices are just exploding, and we need to protect people from the mishaps that can occur. What should a business do? Make sure that you conform to the security regulations that are coming along. Make sure you test. Make sure you certify that you have done your job as well as you can. Avoid the financial penalties that could happen if you didn't meet the requirements of these new regulations that are coming along. And in the next 1 to 5 years, I think companies will learn how to deal with these kinds of security problems. They're going to fix their supply chain issues that might be coming along. They're going to fix the implementations of the devices out in the field, and ideally evolve their security posture to protect themselves as best as possible. Is it going to be perfect? Unfortunately, no. But if you do the best you can, you're going to have a safer world in the future.
And overall, you sound incredibly optimistic. So genuinely, you're quite excited about the way forward.
Oh, you bet. I will tell you this. I've been with my company almost 30 years now, and I can tell you every morning I'm just fascinated by how well IoT has been adopted and the new kinds of markets that are being opened up based on the capabilities of the ability to have remote data and the ability to provide remote control of devices out in the field.
And for anybody listening, would like to talk a little bit more with you or your team, or just learn more about the work that you're doing and the explosive growth of IoT, where would you like to point everyone listening today?
Oh, please come to our website, www.aeris.com. Come and take a look. Actually, by the way, I have a free book available on PDF that people can download from our website if they want to learn more about IoT. And I find it fascinating that I've done tutorials on the topic of IoT for indeed middle schoolers and high school age children who have become absolutely fascinated by what could be done for them. They are living in a computing era where the concept of IoT, I think, is going to get them pretty excited about everything that's going on.
That's incredibly kind of you. So if you get your team or yourself, if you could email me a copy of that link to that PDF, I'll add it to the show notes so people listening can just click on that and have a little view as well. But more than anything, just thank you for coming on today, talking about IoT in a language everyone can understand, and also just hammering home that message that businesses can no longer afford to treat IoT security as an afterthought, but equally how AI-powered solutions like IoT Watchtower can change the game. So many big talking points. I'd ask everybody listening to check out that PDF, get in touch with you. But more than anything, thank you for starting this conversation today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Neil. I truly appreciated it.
So as businesses race to connect more devices than ever, I think it's clear that the days of treating IoT security as somewhat as an afterthought, they must end, especially with tougher regulations on the horizon and smarter tools on hand. Every organisation now has the chance, the opportunity to build resilience now rather than regret it later. But the bigger question is, how ready is your business to face that reality? All sounds very easy on a tech podcast, but I know it's much more complex than that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please message me on LinkedIn, just at Neil C. Hughes. And remember to check out my site, techblogwriter.co.uk, if you want to work with me, and also techtalksnetwork.com. if you want to browse all the other episodes we've got. Well, that's it for now. So thank you for joining me as always, and I'll speak with you all again soon. Bye for now.